Everybody's in this room and have gotten to where you've gotten to because you're competitive. Everybody wants to make the team. The reality is that's not going to happen.
This is FNL Lacrosse.
Moving right to left. Pearl, the nice pass for Capadoro. Stoned at the doorstep.
FNL Lacrosse. Only on ESPN New Hampshire.
603-883-9900 is the phone number. It is FNL Lacrosse. ESPN New Hampshire, ESPNNewHampshire.com, and on the ESPN radio app. Nick Anastas, the coach Chris Cameron sitting in. Already heard from Bedford coach Matt Girard, our star of the week, Cody Marquis, and Russ Moyer of 603 Lax. Good way to start the show, Coach. Big second hour, as we talked about. Mike Armstrong of SportStop New Hampshire in just a moment. Our weekly swag bag segment, talking about new equipment and new gear. Coach Greg Cannella of UMass at the bottom of the hour, and a full high school schedule to go over in the back part of the show. And we'll also react to some of Russ Moyer's predictions in just a moment. But first, time for our swag bag segment. It's brought to you by SportStop of New Hampshire. SportStop of New Hampshire is your locally owned and operated one-stop shop for everything lacrosse. SportStop of New Hampshire carries all brands of lacrosse equipment for both boys and girls. It's real easy to get to, and they are partnered with one of the country's largest .com retailers. So if they don't have it, they can get it. Whether it's beginner packages, team sales, or a huge selection of restringing supplies, SportStop of New Hampshire knows your team. SportStop of New Hampshire, 273 South River Road in Bedford. Call 603-606-1921 or email lacrosse@sportstopnh.com. Mike Armstrong is the manager there, and he's on the phone with us now. Mike, good morning.
Morning. How's it going, Nick?
We are good, sir. Nice job last week. Want to bring you back this week. Talk a little bit about 3 new products that I understand are just hitting the market right now.
Yeah, this week I wanted to touch on the Warrior spring releases, which will be available for purchase May 1st and can be pre-ordered until then. But Warrior's building off their Burn product line even further for their spring releases with a new head and handle. Burn head they've designed for the offensive player, focused on speed, quicker release, easier ground balls, actually advertising a boost on shot speed as well. They've also integrated what they're calling the Sim Rail Twist, which uses a pointed side rail and actually twists in the middle to reduce weight and stiffness. And also the Burn handle they're coming out with, which is a new name on one of the most durable handles on the market, in the Crypto Pro Diamond. It's manufactured in Europe and uses a high-grade aluminum alloy, which allows them to keep a very durable handle while thinning the sidewalls and making it a lighter weight. To round off the Warrior spring release is the Nemesis 2 goalie head. The original Nemesis is Warrior's best-selling goalie head. Tapered sidewalls that increase the surface of the face of the head, and now they've integrated that same Sim Rail Twist sidewalls, which increases the stiffness, which in the original Nemesis was one of the downfalls. It was a pretty flexible head.
I understand that you guys get a lot of frequently asked questions down there at SportStop of New Hampshire, and let's get into some of those, Mike. This week, I suppose, pertains to the head of the stick.
Yeah, one of the most asked questions I get is what makes this head $30 and this head $90. So I'm going to kind of touch on the different aspects to increase the value of the head. First is the offset. Offsets were introduced in the 90s with the Brian Edge, and since then it's completely changed the game. The offset of the head is a small turn at the throat of the head that sets it back from the handle, where before offsets, the handle and head would be aligned straight. The analogy I like to use to explain that is what it does is like catching a ball with a cupped hand versus a palm. So this gives you much better ball control and balance. Next is the plastic. This doesn't always apply, but generally the higher value heads use a stiffer plastic. This doesn't necessarily increase the durability of the head, can sometimes actually have the opposite effect, but it increases the functionality. Having a flimsy head can make things like ground balls and stick checks tough, with the head bending over, and it can also decrease the shot, your speed of your shot. Excuse me. Finally is the stringing pattern. Since the brine clutch came out about 8 years ago, all manufacturers have taken to putting as many sidewall holes on their heads as possible in the higher value heads. This gives the players options at their pocket that they can do, different things can't really get with the lower valued heads. So that's really the top three things that increase the value of the stick.
And also demand, right, Mike?
Absolutely. Yep. that is one thing. Demand, just the Evo evolution has done the name in Warrior for years, and they could do anything with that head and it'd still be a high value.
I've been in there many times what my boys want, and then you do a great job stringing as well. Can you touch on stringing? Yeah,
absolutely. Stringing really applies directly to that player, depending on not only their position but their style of play. You get attackmen that like to hang their stick low and bait defensemen for the stick checks. They like a little bit of a higher pocket so they can drop their stick down, where you get some attackmen that are, nice and tight, straight up and down, one-handed cradling that like the lower pockets.
Now, what about the weather? Nick had asked earlier how the weather affects the game, and my take was the biggest thing is it affects the sticks. What do you recommend? And it's not just the day of the game. The next day, the kids will come to practice, and the ball's going everywhere. What can you recommend for stick maintenance?
Yeah, absolutely. First, the regular hard mesh, which is generally what everybody uses, that will absorb the water a lot and stretch out. But these manufacturers are now coming out with new mesh. East Coast mesh is one of the top ones right now. They use a waxed mesh, and that will actually repel the water. But String King and now Epic Lacrosse is releasing a mesh now that's actually made out of composite, and it doesn't absorb the water. So that's one thing you can try, the new meshes that are out that help with that. But other than that, it's really just making sure that when you store your stick after using it in a rainy, mesh is stretched out, to make sure that you hand the pocket, stick it against the wall with the mesh facing out, and let it dry that way.
Okay. Good stuff, Mike, as usual. Fascinating, I think. Appreciate the time, and we'll talk again next week for sure.
All right, thanks for having me, Nick.
That's Mike Armstrong, manager of SportStop of New Hampshire. Again, 273 South River Road in Bedford. And, we talk a lot, Coach, about preparation and weather conditions and equipment and all that, but it sounds like you really got to kind of stay on top of your equipment. Otherwise, you'll pay the consequences, right?
Oh, it's huge. For the kids that just, whether they play in the rain or any condition, just throw their stick in the bag the next day, it's got to be ready to play. And it's not just you got to dry out your gloves, you got to make sure your helmet's ready to go.
Is that something you got to kind of stay on the kids about, or do they kind of police themselves pretty well?
More so with the younger kids. You got to really give them the advice.
Right.
The high school kids, they know by that point. But no matter what, you have a large group, you're going to have some kids that aren't going to maintain their equipment. But with the younger kids, you got to give them more of that advice and guidance on how to take care of their equipment, especially after a rainy day, or and everything affects it. Sometimes the humidity affects the ball. The humidity, the ball sticks more and it throws down. When you have new lacrosse balls, so there's a lot of learning for these kids.
Is there a particular, I don't know if brand is the right way to phrase the question, but is there some equipment that you favor versus others?
Well, when I played growing up, 90% of the players used traditional, which we called leather. And it's a lot harder to maintain, but that's what everybody used. Now it's the other way around. 90, maybe even 95% of the players use mesh pockets. It's a lot easier to maintain, a lot easier to string. Kids are always, changing their pockets, and it doesn't take some kids do it in 15, 20 minutes to restring their stick.
Are there any advantages to keeping it old school, so to speak, and going the leather route?
You could definitely more customize with the leather route. But these days, as Mike mentioned, the String King, the East Coast mesh, these pockets that you have can be so tailored to your style of play that it's a lot more flexibility. So that's why everyone's going more to the mesh right now.
Obviously, more options now than back when you played, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
603-883-9900, the phone number. You want to jump in, feel free. It's FNL Lacrosse here